Thanks, John. It's great to be here. So, this is not my first rodeo. I've actually done 3 companies. I started my first when I was 22. I'd say it was a modest success. Second one was I like to call it a learning lesson, not a failure. And then OfferUp, I kind of have to pinch myself every day because I can't believe what we get to do. So maybe a quick show of hands. I mean, how many of you here are either working at a startup, building a startup, or considering wanting to do it? Okay, quite a few. Okay, so I think today mostly what I wanted to share was what is important early on, and just give you some lessons I've gone through and things that I've learned. So I'm going to walk through a few things from pulling the ripcord and all the mental stuff that you have to go through to think about jumping from maybe working at a nice stable job with a nice steady income to actually jumping into a startup and doing it. Networking your butt off, which I would say is one of the most important things you need to do early on. And then just kind of how do you get the gears moving once you've kind of made that change, and what are the things that are important, and kind of some lessons I've learned there. And then where to take shortcuts. I took many shortcuts that I know if I had not taken them, I wouldn't even be standing here today. So there are some things you can do. And then I think lastly is kind of building the team. So I'm not going to talk today about later stage stuff. It's more of like, what do I think is important early on to kind of get everything moving. So I think one thing that we all think about when we have an idea, and what I would encourage you to think about if you're pursuing an idea is, if you can't get it out of your head and you're obsessing over it, you should really consider it. And so for me, my short story, in particular, at least with OfferUp, was this is actually a photo of where I used to live. That's my daughter running down the street. And that room up there on the left was actually became her bedroom. And I literally had a room full of stuff I wanted to get rid of. And I remember looking at this room thinking, my life is too short. There's got to be a better way for me to try to sell this stuff. Kill me now. This is going to take me forever using an older solution like Craigslist. And then I spent 5 months trying to convince myself not to do it because this is not the first startup I've done. And I realized there are a lot of work. And of course, imagine me pitching this idea like, hey, we're going to be bigger than Craigslist one day, and with this mobile idea. And everyone understandably thought we were crazy. So I needed to kind of convince myself early on. I'll talk about some of the challenges and what it takes to kind of overcome that. But I think at the end of the day, when you have an idea, like I said, you need to really think about it. And if you can't get it out of your head and you think you have what it takes to build it, you should actually think about pursuing it. So our vision when I started, at least this company, was to transform how people buy and sell by creating the simplest and safest way for people to do it. So I actually believe there's a much bigger market than Craigslist, way bigger. And so again, if you can imagine me pitching that 5 years ago, everyone thought we were crazy. And so in many days early on, I thought we were crazy as well. And so that's the spark. And I think if you have that kind of desire, you should definitely listen to that inner voice. And so a lot of times we feel like this, we're daydreaming about all the things that could happen, and this is going to be so amazing, it's going to be the best thing ever. And so maybe I'll talk for just a few minutes on like, what does it take to actually pull the ripcord and do it. So pre-OfferUp, I had another company, and I remember I was working at a bigger company at the time, and I had this idea that I wanted to pursue. And I think at one point, I was moonlighting, working on it. At one point, I just had to make that decision. Like, am I going to go all in and do this and quit my job or not? And it was a decision that I made on a Friday. I think I told my wife, who's here, on the Monday that I quit my job. I don't think I consulted her. I just kind of did it. But I think, at the time, it was kind of this mental challenge, like, hey, am I giving this enough of my energy, and what do I need to do to actually move forward? And I think for most people, I would actually say you shouldn't do it. And I don't think everyone should do this. And what I mean is, everyone has ideas, and I have people constantly give me their ideas or pitch these ideas. And I think if that's all you bring to the table, that's really not going to kind of get you there. So you have to really look internally and think about, what else can you bring to the table? And so, over I'd say my career, I've had to learn different tools. I've learned how to code. I've learned how to do Photoshop. I learned how to build teams. I learned how to build models. Like, these are things that you kind of have to do early on to actually take that idea and I think turn it into something. I think the other thing that makes it easier over time is having a good partner or somebody else that kind of complements you, is strong in maybe things that you're not. I think that's important. And then, of course, having a good life partner. So in my case, my wife was very supportive, especially when I started OfferUp. I just got off a startup. I had zero income. I had a kid on the way. I felt like a deadbeat, but she was helpful and supportive, and it helped me to kind of get OfferUp off the ground. So I think those are things you kind of have to mentally overcome. But once you pull that ripcord, just go. You just got to go all in, don't look back, and go, and just know that you're going to have to kind of figure it out. So you decide to pull the ripcord. You're feeling like, yeah, this is amazing. I'm going to start the next Google. Investors are going to be knocking on my door. It's going to be the best thing ever. And then reality sets in, and it actually feels like this. And so, I'd say every startup I've done, even though you learn, you can adapt and make things easier along the way. But even this one, early on for many years was extremely hard, and I felt like this almost every single day. And so, I think the things you have to figure out when you don't have a lot of resources are, what are all the things that you need to kind of do, kind of to get things going. And so one thing I think I obsessed over early on that I found was helpful was just how I spent my time. And so, back when we started this company, there was many other startups trying to compete in this space. And the one thing I knew that I could do was just hustle. It was like, I'm going to spend every minute I can doing something to move the business forward, because there was no one else to code. There was no one else to go and raise money. Like, you had to do all those things. And I figured that if I do that better than everyone else, then maybe there's increasing the odds that I think we can be successful. And then I think also early on, I think it's just a mental game of, what are all the things that, when everything seems to be against you, how do you have to overcome them? So another example would be, I think, my wife's boss used to call her the sugar mama, and because I didn't have any income coming in, and he would constantly kind of say that to her, and that kind of was getting to me, because I'm like, yeah, I have no traction, I have no money, I get all that. Now he asked me for startup advice, and I've connected him to some investors, so that's good. But I think those are the things you kind of have to overcome, early on. And then I think the other thing is, again, just being persistent and believing in what you're doing. So it took us over 2 years before we actually raised any venture dollars. Now, if you think about fundraising, one thing I'd say is start early. And really get out and try to find the right people. And so in our case, Seattle has, it's getting more and more individual angels that are out there investing in startups. And so we were fortunate, we were able to tap into a few of those to kind of help us stay alive. But even then, we didn't have a lot of traction. We didn't have a lot of growth. We were still just kind of focused on the product. And so ultimately, it took us over 2 years until we raised a Series A. And by the time we did that, we only had, I think by the time funds came in, we had about $350 in our bank account. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in a minute about how to kind of stretch and kind of get there early on. But I think one other thing I think about early on, it's not so much investing for growth and scale. It's actually the opposite. It's like, don't die. Like, just time and building traction, that's almost more important early on, because in many cases, you don't have the resources, what you need to really scale anyhow. So let's see. So I think the other thing early on, I probably spent half my time just networking my butt off. And networking is a numbers game. You need to get out there and talk to everybody you possibly can, because building a big company, it does take a lot of resources. You need investors, you need advice, you need employees, you need people to actually build what you're doing. And so I would go to every event I could possibly go to early on and talk to so many people. And through that, it took a while. And so I think if you think about yourself and you're not maybe extroverted or uncomfortable talking to people, I'd say find someone else that is. But like I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to people that are not doing this early on, and I think because of that, it's going to be a big challenge. I think if you're able to cultivate relationships and bring people together early on, that's how you build good companies. But it's not just anyone. You have to find the right people at the right time to kind of make things happen. And so another example of just hustling and getting out there and networking, one of the first employees we actually had at OfferUp, I found because I went to the mall and I spent $25 on a t-shirt that said developers wanted, and I listed all the languages on that t-shirt. And I was wearing that all around Seattle, and ultimately we connected with an individual, and he joined and he helped get the product kind of moving for a while. And it was at 25 bucks. He read my t-shirt, he goes, oh, I can do that, and then we were off to the races. So I'd say do it a lot. It's going to be inefficient. You're going to feel like you're wasting your time, and 90% of the time you are, but you only need that one individual. You only need that one investor to say, I believe in you, I believe in where you're going, I'm going to take the time and spend the time. And that investor may lead to another investor. That investor may lead to employees. And eventually you have those employees that will then help you get traction, and then it just kind of snowballs from there. And you raise a Series A, they connect you to people who raise your Series B, and then you're going. But you need to spend, I'd say, a lot of time, early on. So I'm going to give you some true stories that actually happened in this company, and so if you've done this successfully, you're out there, you kind of have a product, you kind of have some investors that have given you some capital to work with, and now you have some employees, and you're trying to get the gears moving. I think early on, the most important thing is obsess over the product experience. Obsess whatever it is that you're building over how all that works. And I think sometimes people underestimate kind of what it takes to do that. And then the question is, okay, now you kind of have a product, how do you scale? And so I'll give you a few stories and ways that we did it. So you can imagine us launching this app. We thought it looked great. We tried to get friends to use it and family to use it, and they were kind of nice. They would install it, but they never did anything with it. And in fact, they're like, hey, Nick, when is this thing really going to take off? It's not really going anywhere. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. And so a few things we would do, and this photo here on the left is actually a moving truck with about 1,000 helium balloons in it. And we did this because statistically, 1 in 4 people in America with a 2-car garage can't park in their garage. So we said, well, this is great. Why don't we just go to the densest neighborhood we can find and go hand out these balloons? And hopefully people install the app, and then we get it going, and then people start to use it. So we had, I was driving the truck. We had people that were kind of handing out balloons, and so it looked cool. At the end, you come home on a Friday, imagine your whole neighborhood decorated and OfferUp balloons at tied to the door. It looked really interesting, but it actually did zero. It didn't do anything. And in fact, that woman right here, I launched her out the back of the truck. I didn't know how to set the brake quite right on a hill, and I actually launched this woman out the back of the truck. And so that was the low of the low on this whole journey so far, at least with this company. I had no traction. We had very little capital at the time, and I just launched somebody out the back of a truck. So I thought at that moment, I'm like, well, I don't know if we can do this. That photo on the right is actually an individual going to a 1-800 junk warehouse and actually trying to get inventory and posting that there. So we did a lot of things to experiment to try to get the gears moving. And I could talk all day about what those were, but I'm talking early on, do things that don't scale. Get out of the desk, go out there and figure it out and talk to people, and that's how you kind of get things moving. So a few places I'd say we cut corners. So one thing that I thought was really important is we waited to incorporate for a long time. And you might say, and for some people that might not be an option, but as soon as you do that, then you have paperwork. And again, if you heard what I said a few minutes ago, I was optimizing for my time. It was like I knew the things I wanted to do and the things I didn't want to do. I didn't want to deal with the paperwork. I didn't have to file all this crap because it didn't help to grow the business whatsoever. And so we waited for a while until we knew we were going to actually raise dollars to go incorporate and do that and deal with the headache of that. We instead of having an office early on, even when we had capital, we said, well, we don't need an office right away. We'd meet at the Bellevue library. We'd meet at Starbucks. There's a cost associated with that. I would network here, and I would also network a lot in California. And every time I went down there, I'd sleep on my buddy's couch and with him and his wife, and I stayed at their house, and I did that for about a year. So it didn't cost me really anything. I think when we also brought in new employees and people to come join us, I was not asking them what they wanted to get paid. I was asking them, what do they need to live? And that's different too, because if you find individuals that don't believe in what you're doing and they want some big exorbitant salary early on, they're the wrong people. And so how we compensated with that is we give them equity. And I'm happy and excited to see like some of these really young kids that were hustling early on for OfferUp, and just to see kind of how it's impacted them and where they are now. So I think that's how you look for the right people. And I think the other area is just cutting corner. If you're a developer, it's okay to cut corners when you're writing code. Just know where you're cutting those corners. So if you like to write pristine code and it's all perfect, you need to rewire your brain, because you need to hack. You need to hack quickly and iterate, and it's not about writing perfect code. But just be aware if you are cutting corners, where that's happening. Just talking about building an early team, and I think what to look for. So if you're in the process or you're thinking about building a company, I think you need to find a co-founder that hopefully is kind of a yin-yang scenario, where they're the opposite of you in many ways and challenges you. And that's really hard. I mean, extremely hard to do that. But then again, early on, who are the people you're finding? If you look at this kind of motley crew of people here, they all look kind of, we're all different and unique in different ways. And I think because of that, that's what makes good companies. Like, you want people to challenge each other and come up with different ideas. I'd also say you want somebody that's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. And so we've had a few people on our team that you can give them anything. You can give them QuickBooks. You can have them go to go find inventory. You can have them do marketing things. Like, find somebody that's a Swiss Army knife, because you don't have a lot of time for that if you're starting your own company. You need somebody that can kind of take that level of work off your plate. And then I think also, again, like I said, find people that are there for the right reasons, and really obsess over the right people, and not just taking anyone. And I can tell you, not with OfferUp, but with my previous company, we would just interview and say, oh, this person, they know marketing, great. And that just doesn't work. And that's the learning lesson that I've learned time and time again. Is it's tough when you really need somebody desperately just to make a call and say, hey, okay, come right in. But usually in the end, that doesn't really scale very well, and you end up in a worse position. So I think just maybe fast forwarding a little bit more to today. So this is a look at the OfferUp team as of about a week or two ago. And we've gone obviously from, 8 people to almost 80. And I think that if you're crazy enough and persistent enough to just keep going and have faith in what you're doing, you can kind of break through and you can kind of get there. And I'd say, like I said, the last 2.5 years have been amazing. And the first 2.5 years, at least, of this journey was pretty rough. And but I think today, to give you an idea, OfferUp is the largest mobile marketplace in the United States. In fact, last year we did about $4 billion in transactions, and this year we're going to be much, much bigger. And this team, I think, will be a lot bigger. And how I spend my time is a lot different. I don't have to go out there and hustle as much. I get a little bit more of my life back. I have kids now. I can go to the gym. Like, I have great people that help kind of take the business and help scale it, even further. So I think the only last thing I would say is, if you have that idea, that spark, and you want to pursue it, I think that life is short. You should just do it. You should just do it and get out there and take that step. And just know that step is not the end. There's a whole bunch of other steps between here and bigger breakthroughs. But I think you don't want to look back when you're old and gray and say, man, I wish I would have done that. So I encourage you, if you have the desire, to go out there and just do it and make it happen. So thanks for the time. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks for being here.